Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. If you want to stream us live, please go to am950radio.com, terrestrial radio. Just turn on the radio, AM 950 Radio. But if you want to put some faces to these names, why don't you join my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel? That's right. Like and subscribe there, and then click the bell so that you can be notified whenever we go live. So the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, you can reach out to me on X on at Santita J. That is my handle, and that at Santita J Show. And Santita Jackson and Friends. Don't go to the Santita Jackson landing page, everybody. They will not let me accept any more friends there. They keep kicking you all off. It's not me, it's Facebook. So please go to Santita Jackson and Friends. That is why I changed the name, so I can get as many of you as I can. Everybody, we've got the State of the Union. We're going to be reacting to that. What did you want to hear in the address? There's a lot that's going on. You've got wages that have risen, but prices have risen even higher because of corporate greed and corporate price gouging. Was that addressed? Let's talk about that. What about student loan debt? What about Gaza? More than 80% of Democrats, more than 2/3 of Americans want a ceasefire, not for 6 weeks, forever. So will that happen? What about Aaron Bushnell? Will anyone speak to his pain and to his death? After all, he was an active serviceman who killed himself trying to draw attention to the injustice that he sees in Palestine. So we got a lot to talk about today, and I've got a tremendous panel of veterans for peace. Indeed, this is one of these special interviews where I get the opportunity to interview my own heroes. Really, it's a blessing to talk to people who've had a crisis of conscience and who met that crisis head on and went on anyway. I have someone here who was court-martialed because of her beliefs, marched in her officer's uniform at the front of an anti-war demonstration for Vietnam, and said, I think it's unbecoming. You think I'm unbecoming an officer? What about when you send someone to be killed? I think that's unbecoming of an officer. We are so excited to have Susan Schnall with us. That's right, the peace leaflet bomber. Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it. And of course, Tarek Kauf, who went into the service, and so many of us call it service. We need to expand that idea to include teachers and doctors and moms and dads and everybody else. Went in, and I think so, in 59 to 62. But you know what? He, as a paratrooper, and he got to his training and became a war resistor. How did that happen? How is it that he became someone who not only resisted war, but resisted oppression and war abroad? What did he see? How did he make the connection between oppression and war and imperialism? And then, of course, Mike Ferner, who's the national director of Veterans for Peace. What did you say? Your head was filled with John Wayne movies? Now, come on. I grew up on those too, along with all these other fantasies that I had to let go of over time. Tarek Kauf, so glad that you're with us, and we're going to talk about your this walk for peace. That's going to go from Maine to Washington, D.C. That's going to take 2 months. But I want to talk to you, Mike Ferner, and I really want to go with each of you before we talk about these criminal prosecutions, criminal investigations, at least that you're pursuing of the Biden administration, and how they are funding. It's not a war, because a war, I would think, is between two equal sides, right? This assault on Gaza, right? So, Mike Ferner, before we get into what Veterans for Peace are doing with these criminal investigations, would you kind of take us on your journey? Because it's a fascinating one.
Thank you, Santita, and thank you very much for having us on here. As you said, I enlisted right out of high school in the Navy with a head full of John Wayne movies, because that's a culture I grew up in, and that was and still is, unfortunately, most of America. So I went in and I was a hospital corpsman, and I worked in a Navy hospital, different one from Susan Schnall, but same sort of thing. And plane loads of wounded young men were coming back from Vietnam, and my job was to be one of the people that tried to put the pieces back together. And after doing that for a while, and finding some corpsmen who were older than I were because they had been through college before they enlisted and knew a heck of a lot more about what was going on, and started teaching me some of the political realities of the world, and putting that together with what I saw laying in the beds in that hospital. I just decided what I had been told all my life was a lie, and decided that I wasn't going to participate anymore, and that I was going to get out. And I did finally a couple years later as a conscientious objector, but not before they sent me out to an aircraft carrier, coincidentally to the same Navy base as the one that Susan Schnall had been dropping leaflets over a couple of years before that. And I was involved with the resistance, and we did everything we could do to prevent that ship from going back to Vietnam. And I got discharged just before it went back. But I think the most important thing I can bring into this conversation is that just before I joined you, I got off the phone with a young woman calling the Veterans for Peace office. And I returned her call, and she's from Michigan, and a very dear friend of hers is a woman who was in the special forces in Iraq and is permanently disabled, has significant physical and mental problems now. And this fighting in Gaza has just sent her over the edge. And she really needs to talk to somebody. She's fortunately she's in counseling, but I'm going to give her a call as soon as I can, and try to connect her with a woman veteran, and just be there for her as she's trying to deal with this terrible post-traumatic stress disorder and everything else that's going on in her life. And it's because the people who make too much money on these wars keep sending people back into them. And those are the people who are at the bottom of this. And so anyway, that's happening. And that's happening to our members. It's happening to people all over the country who have been through this experience. And it's happening to Israeli soldiers. That's something to keep in mind. These, tens of thousands of young men and women are going back to Israel after this. They're going to be full of nightmares and PTSD and too much alcohol and beating up their spouses and all of the things that war produces. And until we get out of this business, we're going to just see more of the same.
But it is important that you mention, or that you bring forward, shall I say, not mention, because it's not that casual, bring forward what is happening with Israeli soldiers, because some of them object to what is happening there as well.
Yeah.
And they are suffering what some people call moral injury.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. They're human beings. And we've been told in our societies that, what we stand for is good, and we wouldn't get sent into something unless there was a good reason. And then we turn out it's all been a damn lie.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we do know is that the military, whether it's the military in Israel, the military in the United States, wants to recruit young people. That's why there are so many military recruiters that are going into high school, because they can get young people who might be searching for what to do after high school, who may need an education, may not be able to afford it, and the military comes in and recruits them. The other thing about recruiting young people is that it's easy to change their minds. It's easy to say, this is what you know, this is what you're going to do, and you're going to do it. It's really, and all these years later, I still think about it. It's frightening to be part of the military, because you think they have complete control over your life. You think about a teenager who goes into the military. Of course, that's what they think. So they have these images about what they should do. Moral injury that you were mentioning comes in when individuals do something that is against their conscience, against something that they can live with. And every time we talk about Aaron Bushnell, I think about moral injury and how much he suffered from that. For all of us who have seen war or taken aware of people who have been to war. We know the injury that can occur. And I think for some of us also, we felt that moral injury, whether we were on the battlefield or we were a part of the military machine and helped to keep it going. And that's something that all of us know very well. You become part of the military, whether you're a nurse, the way that I was, or you're a corpsman, the way that Mike Ferner was. You are a part of the military machine, and the military needs you to keep the war going. I was against the United States involvement in Vietnam when I joined the Navy, and I thought I would be taking care of young people and getting them back to their families and their homes. But what I found out instead is that it just made the military machine that much more efficient. We got folks better, and then they went off to war again, and they stayed in as part of the military. And Mike, the other thing that I think is so important is the military industrial complex is certainly, I don't know whether it's at the top or the bottom, but they're in control in this country. They're in control. They give money to the politicians. They give money to keep on going. They certainly have many more lobbyists in Washington than we're able to afford. And because of that money, they're able to buy off people at every level of the government. And they represent the corporations. And the more wars that there are, and the more battles that are being fought, the more people that die and are destroyed, the more money the military industrial complex makes. And again, Aaron Bushnell, we've spoken a lot about Aaron and also about Norman Morrison, who was a young Quaker who was 31 years old during the war. And he drove to Washington, D.C., and he also set himself on fire in front of Robert McNamara's office. McNamara said that was a searing memory of the war for him. It was really important. Norman Morrison wrote a letter to his wife in which he said, "I love thee." He was a Quaker. He said, "I love thee, but I have been shown what I need to do to stop this war." And that was to stop the war in Vietnam. I think all of us are pained and distressed by what Aaron Bushnell did, but we also know how much war and destruction and the genocide in Gaza is paining all of us who have a conscience. And those who just look in horror and say there's something wrong, there is something wrong. There's something wrong with this government and this military and this society that turns away from such terrible passion and pain. And we all have a responsibility, because we live in this country, to stop what's going on in Gaza, however we can. I have to admit, I'm very enraged about this, because I see people going about their regular work, their regular duties, not recognizing what is going on throughout the world that this government and this military industrial complex is causing.
Lieutenant Susan Schnall, court-martialed in 1969. Why were you court-martialed? What did you do? How did this proper, lovely young woman, this beautiful American flower, how did you become anti-war in that? I mean, what got you on that path?
Actually, I was against war. I went into nursing to help people get better. And I went into the Navy to take care of those who were wounded in war. But I saw more and more hatred. Part of it was what these young people had done overseas and how they talked about the atrocities they committed. And they were able to commit these atrocities because they would describe they were fighting against people who didn't look like them. And it reminded me of the racism in this society, that all you do is say that person who looks like this or looks like that, that's your enemy. And you can do this with young people, and they go into war. So it was part of saying, oh my God, this is what we're doing in the military. I actually got my inspiration from what the United States was doing overseas in Vietnam, which was dropping flyers on Central South Vietnam, urging the residents to go to, quote, protective hamlets to avoid being bombed and sprayed by Agent Orange. And I thought, well, if the United States can do this 8,000 miles away against a government and people that far away, why can't we do this for peace in the United States? I had a friend who was a pilot, and we took our leaflets that we were using to organize for the October 12th GI and Veterans March for Peace in the San Francisco Bay Area. We dropped the flyers on Oak Knoll Naval Hospital, on Treasure Island, Yerba Buena Island, on the Presidio, which was an Army base. And then we flew into Alameda Naval Air Station and dropped the flyers on the deck of an aircraft carrier. And then I had a press conference in my uniform. I was then issued a Navy regulation that said you cannot wear your active duty uniform while protesting publicly, whether it's religious or political or whatever. And I wore my uniform in the peace demonstration on October 12th, 1968, and spoke out against the war. The military then tried me by general court-martial on 2 charges. One was conduct on becoming an officer, and the other was disobeying a Navy regulation by wearing my uniform publicly. I was found guilty of both charges. The Navy attorney wanted to give me 5 years hard labor at confinement. I actually got 6 months at hard labor. And that's my Navy story. And from there, I became active in different anti-war organizations. And like both Tarek and Mike, I am an active member of Veterans for Peace, and today I'm president of the national organization. So we have this incredible group, an organization of people who went to war and saw what it was about and came back and now work for peace and justice. It's an extraordinary organization with extraordinary people who do wonderful work.
And I can't help, as I listen to your story, Mike Furter, and yours, Susan Schnall, and I can't wait for you to share with the audience, Tarek Kauf, your story. The last time that I saw my grandfather, Charles Henry Jackson, who was a World War II veteran, the last time I saw him alive, I spoke with him frequently, but it was interesting. He and my father and my Uncle Saint and my grandmother were standing in their bedroom because my father was about to leave town. He had just come in. We were visiting with them, as you do with your grandparents in the summertime. But my father was leaving because he had to go someplace to work. And my grandfather started talking about the war and how awful it was. He said, baby, just always know that war is a horrible thing. And then he went into the Black soldiers' experiences at Dachau and Auschwitz. He said, we were the ones who were sent in to rescue the Jewish people who survived because those places were laden with landmines. So they didn't mind if they lost Black soldiers. He said, so many of my buddies were blown up. And I had never heard my grandfather talk about the war before, ever. And I heard so much regret and pain in his voice. And it wasn't just the racism that he experienced there. He just said, don't ever let anyone tell you anything other than this, baby. Because I was going to leave the room because it was grown people talking, right? I was 15. He said, no, I want you to stay here for this. War is an awful thing. He said, it is unnatural for me to kill another human being. He said, and that's what I was trained to do. And he said, and it fills my heart with grief to this day. And he was dead 6 months later at the age of 59. And it just, it breaks your heart because I think about him. He was not a young 59. Like many men of that particular era, he was an old 59. And I can't help but look at the war for that. Even though, World War II, you wanted to rescue, Jewish people. You wanted all of these things. But wow, for him to say after all of that, this was a horrible thing. Tarek Kauf, I want you to talk to us, Mr. Paratrooper from the U.S. Army. And yet you came through that system opposing not just the Vietnam War, but all wars. and oppression everywhere. How did you make the connection in the Army? What happened? What happened to you there?
Well, I started to make the connection in the Army. I went into the Army after watching and being aware of the role the paratroopers played in World War II, and it seemed glorious. And I thought, well, this would be glorious. I can defend everything noble, everything glorious. And I soon found out, as your grandfather found out, that we were just being trained to kill other human beings. And it wasn't glorious. It wasn't glorious at all. And I was fortunate that I got out in the middle of 1962, shortly before my outfit, the 101st Airborne Division, got sent to Vietnam. And I am so grateful that I did not have to participate in that, because they did terrible things over there. Nothing they did was glorious. And I was just thinking, as you were speaking of your grandfather, of my friend Jay Wenk, who Mike and Susan knew, who was a member of Veterans for Peace, who was a World War II infantry veteran. And he wrote a book about it. But he said there is no such thing as a good war, because he saw the terrible things that happen in war. And he liberated one of those camps.
Mm-hmm.
He also saw the racism and the bigotry in war. And the connection, the question you asked about how to make the connection between the oppression that we see here at home and the wars abroad and the oppression abroad, it's very direct. Because when you realize the history of this country was founded on genocide of the Native Americans and slavery, I mean, that's not a good start. That wasn't a very good start for this country.
Mm-hmm.
And it's continued. And that oppression on both Native American people and people of color has continued to this day. And that is a war right here at home. And we see the violence that we perpetrate, that the U.S. Perpetrates overseas. We see it coming home. There are mass shootings almost every day, if not every day in this country. We are armed to the teeth. And this is a business. The whole thing is a business. And who pays for the business? For the business of war and militarism and the violence both at home and overseas? Regular, normal U.S. taxpayers and communities are paying for that. That's where that money comes from. That's exactly where the money comes from. That's going, the billions of dollars that are going to keep a genocidal war in Gaza against these Palestinian people who have no defense against it. The money, those billions of dollars, is coming from each one of our communities in this country to pay for that. That's where it comes from. Instead of providing social services, other things that people in communities need, people who are at need do not get this money. It goes out of their pockets, and it goes into the pockets of the people who control the military-industrial complex, the people we may not even see. And then it's funneled back through organizations like AIPAC, the Israel lobby, into our politicians, so the thing keeps going. And I don't even know if they can stop it, because our whole economy is based on that. And it's a terrible thing. It's not a good thing. We are not the land of the free and the brave, and we are not a democracy. If we were a democracy, the 70% of the people in this country that opposed the genocide, and there's no question that it's genocide. There's no question about that, and there's no excuse for it. And I've been in Palestine. I've been in Palestine with veterans delegations before the genocide, and I've seen how bad it was. I've seen the apartheid. I've seen the cruelty, the arrogance of the IDF, of the Israelis, and I happen to be Jewish on top of it. So nobody can accuse me of being anti-Semitic. It had nothing to do with being anti-Semitic.
Maybe they can now.
Well, they can, but it won't stick. It won't stick with me. They do it, and that is done. That is a tactic. That is a tactic to silence any criticism of Israel. But we are not against the Israeli people or the Palestinian people or any people. What we are against is the violence of war and the extreme violence of oppression. And that's what we're all standing up for, all of us here, yourself included. And your father set an example for that, of standing up against oppression. But I tell you, back to your question, by the time I got out of the Army, after 3.5 years, my eyes started to open. And then I became aware of what was going on in Vietnam. I became very aware of that. And once your eyes start to open, you don't want to close them again. You want to see the truth in all its dimensions. It may not be beautiful. It may not be the truth that you had when you were a kid, when you thought that this is the greatest country in the world, blah, 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 all of that. But it's truth, and it's important. And that's what we had to follow. And we keep people in Veterans for Peace. We don't follow an ideology. It's not an ideology we follow. We want to see the truth, and we want to stand for truth, whatever it tells us. And that's why we do what we do. And that's why I've been doing what I did. And by the way, I also have spent time behind bars, not only here in this country for civil disobedience, like we all have, but I spent 2 weeks in Limerick prison in Ireland.
Why?
Well, we were over there with a delegation, and Mike was there also. We were with a delegation opposing, with our Irish comrades, our Irish friends over there who have their own Veterans for Peace organization in Ireland. We're an international organization, and they have been opposing for years the U.S. military use of a civilian airport in Ireland, Shannon Airport. And Ireland is supposed to be a neutral country. So when the U.S. is using that airbase to funnel weapons and troops, armed troops, all kinds of stuff, plus the CIA used it to funnel the prisoners that went to Guantanamo. The U.S. has been doing that for years, and people in Ireland don't like it, but the government plays ball with the U.S. So we were over there to join the resistance to that violation of Irish neutrality, which is really precious. And Ken and I wound up one day going out on the airfield, making our way through the fence, cutting through the fence and the barrier and the barbed wire. And Ken, my friend Ken Mayers, was a major in the U.S. Marine Corps. He's a few years older than I am. And we went on to the airbase to inspect 3 U.S. planes that we were there, because we knew that they carried troops and weapons. And the Irish police, the Gardaí, who's supposed to inspect the planes, never does, because the U.S. government told them, oh, there's no weapons on board. And I said, what, you believe the U.S. government? And so we got arrested, and we became national heroes, actually. The Irish kept our passports, saying, well, they may not come back for trial, which of course we did. And we were in Ireland for 9 months. And during that time, we spoke out about U.S. militarism and also about the damage that U.S. militarism and these wars and these U.S. bases all over the world do to the environment that we are trying to preserve. So it all connects. And I don't have to do it right now, but we're trying to connect all of that on the peace walk. And that's why we're doing this walk for peace, for the planet, for the environment, for justice, and for democracy. And we also recognize, as Mike can speak very eloquently, who is behind all of this and what is behind all of this and what is the root cause of all these damaging wars and oppressions. So I think I'll stop there.
Well, the peace walk begins April 27th. You said it's going to take place for about 2 months.
Yes.
How can people participate? How can they, if not walk, how can they support this peace walk?
Thank you for asking that, because we do want people to join, and we want people to participate, and they can start out their participation by going to peacewalk2024.org, That's our website. And that lays out why we're walking, what we hope to accomplish, and where we're going, and what towns and cities we will be passing through and along what routes. So people can join us for a day, they can join us for a mile, they can join us for a week, or they can join us for the entire walk. And we do have some people who have signed up to join, to stay with us for the entire walk. So we will be having presentations at towns and cities that we're going through, hopefully. And perhaps we'll raise some awareness.
Hmm. Well, you know, and I wanted to hear everyone's stories, and I felt that it was important for the audience to hear everyone's stories because we see many commercials that speak of the courage of our veterans. But the story that's not told is the stories that they come home with. Many of them come back disillusioned. Many of them come back, they might not be doing what you're doing, but they certainly have those sentiments. Or they're really trying to work through things like Pat Tillman was trying to do before he was killed, before he got home in front of his brother. Never heard of, it's just so cruel. But Mike Ferner, would you please explain why the veterans are urging a criminal investigation of the Biden weapons? I mean, criminal investigation. Now that's a little heavy.
Well, basically because they're criminals. They're violating federal statutes that are felony violations. We've identified a minimum of 5 U.S. laws and 1 executive department policy that are being violated every time these weapons shipments are made. There are laws on the books that the president is ignoring. The State Department, and that's where our letter went, the State Department is responsible for authorizing these weapons shipments if they pass certain requirements in the law. Now, the State Department just goes along with what the Biden administration wants and what with Congress wants. And the thing is that there is an individual does not have the ability under our Constitution and legal system, does not have the ability to sue the government for not following the law. So in this case, the only way to enforce these laws that have been on the books sometimes for decades is to have the House and the Senate conduct investigations, hold hearings, and then issue resolutions which would enforce the law. Now, nobody that I know, at least, really thinks that's going to happen either. But we are using this letter and the information in it as a tool to explain to people yet again, in another way, what their government is doing and how it's not just immoral, but it's criminal. It's felony violations. So that's what we're doing with this. We sent this to the Inspector General of the State Department on February 11th and have not heard anything from them. So we've been organizing our members in 16 different cities around the U.S. that have State Department offices to go and deliver this letter personally, which they have been doing for the last 2 days. And in the process of doing that, we have run into current and former State Department officials who agree with us. One of them is Josh Paul, who resigned a few months ago, and because he couldn't stand to continue doing what he was doing because he knew it was in violation of the law. And he introduced us to just recently to a couple of current State Department employees who feel the same way. And then we found out that these two were young staffers, and we found out that they started their own group. It's called Feds, Feds, 4, Feds for Peace. And they have members in 30 federal departments and agencies. And they put the name of their organization listing all the departments that they have members in. They just yesterday put those names on our letter. And when Susan and Tarek and I go to Washington next week, we're going to deliver that letter again to the State Department with the names of the Feds for Peace organizations that they represent. And so what we're seeing is again, it's just like this woman who called me just before the show. People, luckily, people are basically pretty decent. The military training knocks it out of you and turns you into whatever. Our culture does the same thing too often, but deep down inside, that's not how people are. And sometimes it's their religion that teaches them morality. Sometimes it's just compassion, whatever it is. And when things like what we're seeing now in Gaza continue to happen, it terrifies people. It hurts them. Now, we talk about Aaron Bushnell. He was experiencing, I'm sure, very deep pain before he decided he was going to self-immolate in protest. And that's what happens. I mean, it's happened to all three of us on this show and to millions of people who have been put in a situation where you find yourself implementing the policies of a bunch of madmen arsonists. These people set fires all over the globe. And we run around now in the peace movement. We try to put them out one at a time with a bucket of water. Tarek was saying, talking about the roots of the problem. We're calling people in our government who are running the show madmen arsonists, and they are doing the work of their corporate masters. Raytheon, Boeing, General Dynamics. And these people, because of corrupt Supreme Court decisions going back 100 years, these corporations have the rights of free speech. That's how they can lobby and advertise and take representatives out and write legislation and do all the things they do, because to prohibit them would be a violation of a corporation's First Amendment rights. Now, how insane is that? So I've been involved with the peace movement for 50 years, and I'm really glad that Veterans for Peace is beginning to work with an organization that is really focusing on taking away corporations' constitutional rights, because until we get them out of the business of lobbying and writing legislation, we're never going to be able to put out the fires fast enough. And what a wonderful day it would be when AIPAC and General Dynamics lobbyists go to Washington and they are told, no, you can't lobby here because you no longer have First Amendment rights. They're going to holler and scream and say, oh, this is our right under the Constitution. Sorry, it used to be, but not no more. And so we're hoping that we can get this point across and work with people around the country who are trying to make this basic constitutional change to keep these madmen arsonists away from the matchbox, because they not only set these fires all over the world, they as much as lit the match on Aaron Bushnell. They're the ones who are responsible. And we have to live up as Veterans for Peace. We have to live up to our responsibility to not just say, oh, let's go chase these madmen around with buckets of water. We have to tell our colleagues, here's what we can do to take their matches away before they continue.
Well, I mean, but as you look at pursuing this action, I can't help but we've called Aaron Bushnell's name so many times today, but I don't think we can call it enough. Or Mr. Morrison's name.
Yeah.
Or these other people who self-immolated that know the corporate media are not focusing on at all.
And one of the most beautiful things, excuse me for interrupting, one of the most beautiful things about the Black Lives Matter movement is when they repeatedly said, say their name, say their name.
That's right.
And if we started saying the name of all the Palestinians and all the Iraqis and all the Afghans that have gone down that same rat hole, we would be telling people's names for the rest of our lives.
Well, I mean, then there's so many questions that are coursing through my head. Why was it significant? Because you protested wearing your uniform, Ms. Schnall.
Yes, yes.
Why was it significant that Aaron Bushnell was in uniform?
Because and I can say what my reason was at that time, because I was a member of the armed forces, and I felt that it was important for the American people to hear me as a member of the military, to understand that not everybody that was in the military, in fact, was supportive of the United States in Southeast Asia, and that there were a number of us who were opposed. And actually, it was one of the turning points for the American involvement in Vietnam was that those in the armed forces went against the military and went against the war and spoke out more and more. And what I've heard about Aaron Bushnell is, as a member of the military, he felt he was complicit in the genocide that was going on in Gaza. He felt that because he helped the military to function, that he was complicit and he was guilty. And he took his position very seriously and said, no, I will no longer be part of that genocide. And took the action that he did. And I think we all heard or read what he said at the end of his life was free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine. And it meant, right, get out of Gaza, leave the people to be free. One of the most horrifying, another of the horrifying issues that's going on is to hear Israeli government officials saying they want to take over, they will take over Gaza, they will put a settlement there, there will be no more Palestinians there. It is the same thing that happened to the Jews in the Second World War. And how does this keep on happening? How part of the things that I think we really need to talk about is how, in fact, do we change human behavior and have respect and concern for all living things and understand that war desecrates the planet. It kills humans. It destroys all living things. And we need to kind of think, okay, how do we in fact preserve life on this planet? We have another major project in Veterans for Peace called the Climate Crisis and Militarism. We all need to understand that as we get more and more into more wars, that we create the climate crisis and we can keep it going. So until we end wars, until we end the impact of the military-industrial complex, the climate is going to continue to deteriorate.
But
And
until
we
we
doing it. Yes, Mike.
until we take the matches away from the madmen arsonists and prevent them from lobbying and buying elections, they're going to continue doing what they're doing. And one of the things that happens is we have a climate crisis. Another thing is we have a genocide, and it goes on and on and on. But the root of it is because we are allowing corporations to govern. They are running this country. And until we take away their right to do that, we're going to be chasing around for a long time. And all of the work that Susan's talking about and Tarek's talking about that people are doing is wonderful, good work. But we have got to try to figure out a way to get more strategic and get at the root. I don't want to keep chasing these SOBs around until I'm dead and then have nothing to show for it.
Well, are we living out the nightmare that President Eisenhower foresaw?
Yeah.
Yes.
What did he see 60 odd years ago? He saw something. And this is, I'm reminded, I only have about 10 minutes left here, but I have to have you all back. Because I think of Ronald Reagan. He was the first president to do the salute. He was an actor. And they asked, when they asked President Eisenhower to do it, Mr. Cowell and Ms. Schnall and Mr. Ferner, he refused. He said, no, I'm president now. This is civilian society. I don't do that. So, are we living out this nightmare? He said, beware. I think it's ironic that the night before Kennedy goes in, he's like, friend, countryman, lend me your ear. I got something to tell you. I'm about to run into a problem.
There's no question that Eisenhower predicted the direction that the country was going in. I have been reminded that President John Kennedy gave a peace talk at American University in which he talked about the necessity to have peace in the world and have peace in this country. And within several months, he was so we need to understand what has been kind of a trend in this country of people who, in fact, spoke about peace and social justice, like Kennedy, like Martin Luther King, like Malcolm X. How, in fact, and I hear you, Mike Ferner, I feel that all of the work that we do to educate people about what is being done in our name with our tax dollars makes us complicit in that genocide in Gaza and responsible to stop it. So I think we need to educate people, and we need to keep talking, and we certainly need to put our position for peace and social justice out there as veterans who have seen what this country does and what this country does not just overseas and to other countries, but what it does to the poor and disadvantaged in this country. We have a responsibility, as Tarek said, to provide health and education to all of the people here instead of wars.
I'm shocked, I only have about 6 minutes. This is too unfair. Mr. Kauf, you go to Palestine, to Okinawa, to Korea, to Ireland. I mean, you go to these places where you can see oppression from Western imperial powers up close and personal. Why there? Why
Well,
don't you
not
take
only
a chill pill and go someplace lovely. Come on, what you doing?
go sit on some beach somewhere.
Yeah.
Because an injustice to any is an injustice to all. And we feel this deeply. And when Michael Brown was killed, we went with a team of veterans to Ferguson to stand with the people there, to stand in solidarity as veterans who once served this oppressive system, who were like police, who once served this oppressive system. And we wanted to show that we stand with the people. We stand with all oppressed people. And we mean that because we identify with it. It's not to do anything spectacular, but these are our people. The people in Palestine, the people in Okinawa that are resisting U.S. bases being built over there and destroying their beautiful environment. These are beautiful people. And when we travel to places like this, where people have been resisting occupation, have been resisting oppression, have been resisting the might of the U.S. military machine, it empowers us as human beings. And we make this connection. Why do I go overseas? Because these international connections are so important. It strengthens us who go. It strengthens the people that we go to stand with in solidarity. It's just a strengthening thing. It affirms our own humanity that we're doing this. We're not doing it for profit. We're not doing it for fame. We're not doing it for any of that. We're doing it because that's what it means to stand up for being a human being. To be a human being, you stand with the oppressed. You stand with those who are suffering from all this corporate. They had a revolution here a few hundred years ago because there was a king that they didn't like that was telling them what to do. Well, the corporate masters we can't, at least they could see King George. At least they knew who it was. The corporate masters that run this country, we can't even see them, but they are stuffing the billions of dollars. They are stuffing the wealth of this country and the wealth of the world into their greedy pockets. And they have 6 homes and they have airplanes and they have boats and everything like that. While people are starving right here in this country and all over the world because of what they do. And at least we have a responsibility, we feel, to get that truth out there so that people know, so that it is not hidden. We want to rip the veil, or the veil that hides these corporate masters away, so everyone can see it and everyone can realize that.
Well, perhaps we need to say their names. I have a couple of minutes left. If you would, Susan Schnall, and then Michael Ferner, you're going to close us out. What would you like to say, and how can we support Veterans for Peace as you pursue this criminal investigation of these weapons going to Israel?
Thank you.
As Americans say, don't do that.
You
Not
can certainly, you can join Veterans for Peace. You don't have to be a military veteran to become an associate member. And you can go to our website. It's veteransforpeace.org. Ask us questions about the campaigns that we're doing and the work that we're involved with, and become active with us. We have chapters in many cities across the United States, and we have wonderful national projects and working groups on multiple issues. And of course, there is the Move to Amend that I know Mike Werner wants to close out with. But Veterans for Peace is a vibrant organization. We need your support and your help. Again, veteransforpeace.org. Come to our webpage, join our organization, and donate to our cause, which is for peace. We are Veterans for Peace. Thank you.
I do hope that you know you have a home on the Santita Jackson Show. Anything I can ever do, please. The platform is yours. Mike Werner, the last minute belongs to you.
Thank you very much, and thank your listeners who are paying attention and hopefully feeling that spark of humanity. Well, in addition to what Susan said, what I would like to encourage people to do is whatever you've done, take the next step. If you've written a letter, stand out on the street corner with the sign. If you've stood on the street corner with the sign, go find somebody and sit down in the middle of the street. Then no more business as usual. And just keep doing this and resist and resist and resist. This is so important to preserve our planet and our humanity.
Veteransforpeace.org, everybody. Go on and get involved. Go on and get involved. Thank you for your service, Susan Schnall, Tarek Kauth, Mike Werner. Thank you for your service to us as human beings. Thank you for that. In the name of my grandfather.
Thank you.
Man. Good man.
I thank for both of them.
Thank you, Santita.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Didn't know it was going to hit me like that, but you took me back. May God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.